Was President Rivlin right in refusing this pardon to Elor Azaria, or did he miss a chance to perhaps put this to calm some of the tensions around this issue?
I don't think it's a question of was he right or was he wrong. I think it's a matter of responsibility and democracy. He was supposed to make the decision, and it doesn't need to be a popular one. It needs to be really a responsible one. In the same way as we don't make decisions about, lowering taxes just because the citizens would like that, the same thing with this decision here. And so do I think it's right or wrong? I don't think it matters. I think it's for him to decide the same way it was for the court of the IDF to decide whether he should go to jail or not and for how long. And I think the fact that the ministers of Israel, or some of them and some of the MKs, attacked his decision, it's something that is now starting to crumble our the roots of our democracy, what we all stand on. It's almost post-Zionism. I think questioning again and again whether the establishment is making the right decision, whether it's the IDF or our courts or the Attorney General, now the President, and this is not the first time we're questioning the President's decision, for me, that's post-Zionism, and it's dangerous.
Alex, your take, not just on his refusal to pardon the soldier, Elor Azaria, but on the reactions to it, something that has prompted Israeli police to open an investigation into incitement against the country's president.
Well, there's no doubt that the president did have the right. It was in his jurisdiction to decide whether Azaria would be pardoned. But the decision not to pardon him does go against the will of a majority of people here in Israel. Again, that was his right. But many within the country feel like soldiers like Azaria are fighting for the lives of Jews, for soldiers and for citizens. And when you say to a soldier that we will not have your back if you make a mistake when you're fighting terror, that sends a powerful message not only to soldiers who are basically called up through mandatory conscription, but also to the Palestinians, telling them that we are not willing to win the war at all costs. And regarding the reactions, I understand the reactions. They're not maybe responsible and pleasant, but I think that the police will find, as Public Minister Gilad Erdan said, that this is repulsive, but it's not criminal. That putting a keffiyeh on somebody's head is not incitement to violence. Israelis in general are very responsible people. On the one hand, we're telling soldiers with guns in their hands that they need to think twice before they shoot terrorists. I don't think that a picture of a keffiyeh on social media is going to push any Israeli to want to take any kind of criminal action against the president or any other member of the government.
Polly, I want you to specifically respond, if you can, to the two points that Alex is making. One is that soldiers need to feel that Israeli society has their back, so to speak. And a lot of politicians have used the expression Elor Azaria is all of our sons. He's a son of all of us. And his second point, just putting a keffiyeh on, or creating an image of a keffiyeh on President Rivlin's head, why should that be an illegal act of incitement?
So first of all, again, it's not for me to decide whether it's illegal or not illegal. I know what it does to our democracy, and I know what it does to our streets, to the way people are becoming more and more violent. And for that matter, I want to agree with Alex. Most Israelis are very responsible. There is a moderate majority in Israel, and they will defend the president. Today, when we decided to sign people on a petition to support the president and ask them to come together with us tomorrow next to his house to show support, many thousands of people reacted, signed the petitions. I saw more initiatives like that on the streets. Most of the Israelis are responsible, but there are a lot of Israelis that are very influenced by the way some of the leaders in the Likud, for example, today decided to attack the president on a decision that is his to make. Now, for your question whether it sends a bad message to our soldiers and so on, I mean, we were there a year ago. We were debating that a year ago. Whether my opinion is that it sends the right message or not, the IDF, his commanders, decided what they decided. He got a sentence that is not unreasonable. He went to jail for 1.5 years, and after the pardon he gets from the chief of the IDF, he will I don't know, serve less than a year in jail. Is that not reasonable? Is that a reason to put a keffiyeh on our president's head? I don't think so. And also, I want to say, we saw Netanyahu speaking today. He spoke, and some of the ministers of Likud spoke out to support kind of support the president after there was a mass, reaction of the majority of Israelis who will not accept that kind of attack.
All right, Polly, on that note, I'm going to stop you right there. Alex will give you a chance to respond more on the allegations of incitement when we're back after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. 40 years ago, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat made the trip that many never imagined would happen. In search of a lasting peace, he took a short flight to Israel and changed the Middle East forever. Join us as we take a look back at Sadat's historic visit and how his dream of coexistence is part of today's reality. Watch our special programming all day November 21st, only on I-24 News.
I'm Tracy Alexander for I-24 News. Join us on Perspectives and get the whole picture as we break down the day's top stories from all angles.
Perspectives, Sunday to Thursday at 5:05 p.m. Eastern.
I-24 News.
Back here on the Rundown, we're continuing our discussion what many in Israel are slamming as incitement against the country's president. Fake images like these depicting President Rivlin with an Arab headdress and calling him a traitor spreading on social media. That after he refused to pardon an Israeli soldier serving a prison sentence for fatally shooting a Palestinian terrorist. Well, with us to discuss it is Alex Traiman from the Jerusalem Bureau. He's the Jerusalem Bureau Chief of the Jewish News Service, and Polly Bronstein, the CEO of Darkano. Alex, I want to go back to your point about whether putting that keffir on President Rivlin's head is incitement. We do have a history here in Israel where that same image was used against Yitzhak Rabin, and Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated soon after. How many times does Israel have to learn the same lesson? Given that history, aren't the police right to err on the side of caution and investigate this as incitement?
You know, it's okay for the Israeli police to open up an investigation. I don't believe that they are going to find that this was a case of incitement. Israelis know a ton about incitement. The enemy of the Israeli people, the Palestinian Authority, have been using incitement for decades and are continuously publishing incitement against Israel and Jewish leaders in social media, on television, in textbooks. So we know a lot about incitement, and we're sensitive to incitement. The incident that happened with Yitzhak Rabin is not a common incident that happens in the state of Israel. I don't think that anybody believes that that was part of any kind of pattern. And obviously, there's not one person in Israel, even those that are really disappointed with the Azaria decision, would ever think that that's the type of action that an Israeli should take against its own leader. It's just unthinkable.
I think that was a nice spin, Alex. I appreciate that spin, taking it to the Palestinian incitement. But I can tell you something. We're not responsible for their incitement. We're responsible for ours and the consequences that can come out of this. And I can tell you something. 22 years ago, or 23 years ago, when people were under the house of Rabin every Friday with, pictures of him with a keffiyeh or SS uniform and so on, being very, very violent towards him. I remember people like me, moderate people, did not come and defend him. We didn't have social media to protect him. We didn't do anything. And at the end, we lost him to a person that maybe was very extreme, but he was inspired by the incitement that was in Israel. So I can tell you something. Now it's the time for moderate Israelis, including yourself, to come out and say, we're not taking this lightly. This is a serious issue, and it's becoming a phenomenon, and it's getting a lot of power from our representatives in the Knesset. Alex. So the first people that should come out against that is people like you and people in our Knesset taking responsibility and saying, we know how this thing
Your
can
response
end.
to that call to action?
Yeah, I most definitely don't think that putting a keffiyeh on anybody's head is productive. I really don't think so. I don't think that it brings a dialogue forward. It needs to be, and it's probably inappropriate. However, I don't think it's incitement. And I think one of the key issues here is that Israel's fighting a war of optics. One of the reasons why the Azaria murder became such an issue of mass hysteria was that it was caught on video. And so too now also these optics are being spread around on social media and in the news. And people are trying to use these optics to question whether Israel is a moral state. But let me tell you, Israel is among the most moral states in the world. I think
that has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. And optics do matter. You're absolutely right, Alex. Because optics matter, putting our president in a kafia and letting people on his page and everywhere in the social media talking against him as if he was a traitor that needs to be killed, that he's a murderer, and so on. And I'm not, I don't want to give exact quotes, but there are thousands of them. That's optics for you. And the first person that needs to come out against that and not make it a left to right issue, because it's not a left versus right issue. It's all of us. And I don't need to remind you that our president didn't come from the Labour Party. Is you guys. It's people from the right wing. It's our representatives. Our prime minister.
All right, Polly, in the minute we have left, Alex, your response to that.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty clear that Israelis right and left don't want to see any forms of incitement whatsoever, and they find it intolerable. The police will decide whether or not this was a case of incitement. If the police think this was incitement, then they should take actions against the criminals that they believe caused incitement. I think that as Culture Minister Miri Regev said, we can't turn every practical discussion into accusation of incitement. This is not incitement. So I think if you're just asking whether this is incitement or not, this probably isn't incitement. Should we ever get to the point of incitement here in Israel? No, we never should, and I don't think Israelis want to get to that.